2 years ago I made a very large no filter vase aquarium. I really loved that build, and apparently you guys loved it as well because that video got over 350,000 views. That seemed like a good enough reason to do another one. But this time I'm going to add a special feature to make sure we can view it from all angles. So let's start with the vase itself. I had to buy a new one because the old one had too many scratches. The new vase is slightly smaller but still a really good size. The height is 35 centimeters and almost 14 inches, and the width is 30 centimeters and almost 12 inches. Now I'm not very good at math, but if I have to leave this calculator, that should still give us a total volume of almost 25 liters or 6.5 gallons. There will be links below to everything that I'm using for this no filter vase, so make sure to check that out. Now when you're buying a vase, make sure that the glass has a reasonable thickness. The cheap ones are usually really thin, and I wouldn't feel very comfortable filling them all the way up with water. Also pay attention to small imperfections. This one, for example, has a little bubble, so I make sure that side is at the back. Basically, the only piece of equipment you really need is a light. I'm using an 8-watt LED light which clips nicely onto the glass. This is actually the same light that I used 2 years ago, so it's a proven performer. And before we start scaping, I just want to add a foam mat to the bottom of the vase. I do this with all my aquariums, and it's just a safety feature that helps to distribute the weight evenly. Okay, so let's begin. The first step to a healthy ecosystem is a nutrient-rich and active substrate. I'm going to keep it really simple this time with just Aquasoil. I love this stuff because it is so easy to work with. Simply open a bag, pour it in, and you can start scaping. For the hardscape, I'm going to use Dragonstone. This is one of the most popular rocks used in aquascaping, and you should be able to find it in most shops. Just make sure you rinse it well beforehand because the holes are usually filled with a lot of clay. Besides the Dragonstones, I'm also going to use a few pieces of wood. This will add some height to the layout and give us more place to attach moss and ferns to. That's the hardscape done. I like how it looks, and I've only used 4 Dragonstones and 3 pieces of wood. The only thing left to do now is to glue everything together. If we skip this step, the pieces of wood are going to float up when we fill the vase with water. I always use tiny pieces of cotton and wedge them in between the 2 points that I want to connect. I then soak the cotton with liquid superglue, wait a few seconds, and everything should be locked together. This method is cheap, works really fast, and it is also completely safe for fish and shrimp. Now we can start planting. I'm going to take some plants from my other tanks, and I also have a few new plants. Here's how the vase is looking immediately after planting. So I'm not going to use a filter, but I do want a little bit of flow. So that's why I'm adding this tiny USB pump. This is totally optional, but you can find these on Amazon for less than 10 bucks, and they're very quiet. That little bit of flow is just going to add some natural movement to the layout. It will also help keep the water quality in check. I highly recommend to use some floating plants as well. They will help soak up excess nutrients released by the Aquasoil, and they grow quite fast, which helps to establish a brand new setup. To kickstart the nitrogen cycle, I'm also adding in some ram's horn snails. These guys will help keep the vase nice and clean, and the tiny amount of waste that they produce is converted into nutrients for the plants. After 10 days, I added an army of these white Neocaridina shrimp. I started with just a few of them in the Lavazone Arch aquarium, but they have been breeding like crazy. These little guys are the perfect cleanup crew as they eat algae, dead plant matter and biofilm. Now I did add quite a lot of shrimp, so I'm going to also feed them once or twice a week with some shrimp pellets. Now at the moment the vase is situated between two other tanks, so I can't really see what's happening on the left or right side. So I want to see if I can make this vase rotatable. After browsing through Amazon for a little bit, I found this heavy-duty aluminum alloy rotary bearing plate, which should do the trick. It arrived the next day, so I quickly unpacked it, drained most of the water from the vase and placed it on the bearing plate, and it works perfectly. The vase can now be rotated with minimum effort. Okay guys, the vase is now 6 weeks old, 43 days to be exact, and I'm absolutely loving it. I have a little styrofoam box here with some new inhabitants. These are the final additions. I've already added a few fish in here. There's a lot to talk about. I don't know if it's because all my other tanks are either squared or rectangular, but this round vase is just feels like a whole nother experience, you know? Also because it's quite a simple setup, you know, we just have a light and a USB pump. If you have paid attention, you might have also noted that I am using CO2 in here. If you haven't seen it, let me quickly show you. So basically in the back here, I'll get a better shot of it. In the back here we have a CO2 diffuser, and then in the cabinet below I have a CO2 system. Now the only reason I'm using CO2 is just because I want to show you guys an end result within a relatively short amount of time, you know. None of the plants here need CO2, you could perfectly do this low tech, but it would just take a little bit longer to get to this result. And I'm actually thinking that now that the tank is grown in, to remove the CO2 as well, because it would be nice to kind of slow down the plant growth at this point. I have trimmed the plants once in the past 6 weeks, and I think it's almost time for a second trimming session because the Micranthemum ambrosium, that's this light green plant that you see on the right, is always getting quite big and it's going to need a trimming session soon as well. I love that this thing is now rotatable. Like, it's so easy to show you guys things, you know, just turn it a little bit. Absolutely love it. So initially I was just thinking to keep this a shrimp only tank, but you know, it's quite big, it's 25 liters. And in the tank next to it I had a big group of dwarf rasboras. So I've just moved a few of them in here. So now we also have a little bit more movement in the upper and in the middle section. And I've also added 2 other sinklets just to kind of help keep the glass nice and clean and algae free. Because I've been using CO2, I've also been dosing liquid fertilizer. I'm using the 2-hour Aquarist APT3. This is a complete liquid fertilizer. So it's just 1 pump every 2-3 days. Super easy. I have a discount code for this stuff, which I will leave in the video description. Okay, now let's talk about these new inhabitants. I was thinking, what else can we put in the vase and how can we add a little bit more color? Then I started thinking about snails. I mean, we already have the ram's horn snails, but we can definitely add a few more. So I basically placed an order for 100 euros worth of snails. We have 4 different types. We have Cleton snails, we have red racing snails, steel helmet snails, and blueberry snails. Of course, they're not all going to go into the vase. I'm just going to kind of spread them out all over my other tanks. But yeah, let me just unpack them, start acclimating them, and then we can have a closer look. Okay, so first up we have these steel helmet snails. These are not going in here. They're not very colorful, but I thought they looked cool. Then over here we have a mix of the Cleton snails and the blueberry snails. So the small ones are the Cleton and the bigger ones are the blueberry snails. But these guys are going in here. These are the red racing snails. Obviously the most colorful, so these are going to go in the vase. I have 10 of them. I'm going to add all 10 of them in the vase.